12 logical fallacies. Know them, analyze them, and don't use them. So the goal of this short set of videos that we're going to talk through right now is to introduce to you 12 logical fallacies and the concept of logical fallacies so that you can see them and recognize them in people's writing, as well as you can avoid them in your own writing. Let's start by asking, what is a fallacy? Have you ever heard the word before? Do you know what it means? Well, if you take a look at the picture, you can see the guy who thinks he's walking along the right way, whistling his tune, but he's actually about to walk off a cliff. And a logical fallacy is something that seems like it's logical, but actually it's leading to a logical cliff. You're in danger of being illogical when you do it. So they're defective, false ideas that weaken arguments. Knowing logical fallacies when you write helps you to avoid those types of weak arguments. And when you're in an argumentative essay and you're doing a counter-argument, it helps you expose and show the arguments of others that are not logical. So let's start by looking at the first 4 of them that you want to know. It's important to remember that logical fallacies are sometimes very persuasive. And oftentimes they're hard to identify. If you've included one in your own work, it's often the most difficult to spot our own logical fallacies we've done. But with practice, we can become better at noting it. There are weak points in your argument that you want to avoid. So let's start by looking at the first 4 logical fallacies that you'll want to know. The first is called hasty generalization, or sometimes we just call it generalization or overgeneralization. This is assuming something about a whole group based on a small sample or a non-typical example. You can see in the cartoon the guy with the smile is presenting generalized truth based on a sample size of one person. That's a hasty generalization. Let's look at this example sentence. People who want to immigrate to another country are likely to be low-skilled and unable to succeed in their own country. Now, how's that a hasty generalization? Well, it might be generalized based on the author simply looking at 1 or 2 cases of people who wanted to immigrate, and they were low-skilled and unable to succeed. And so the author is saying that anybody who wants to immigrate to another country is likely to be low-skilled and unable to succeed. Hasty means he made it too fast, and he should have been waiting to see what all of the data said before he drew that generalization. Be careful that you don't draw hasty generalizations in your own arguments, and be on the lookout for it in other people's arguments so that you can expose it. The next type of logical fallacy we'll look at is called the non sequitur, and that's a Latin word that means it does not follow. And here we have a statement that doesn't follow logically what's been said before that. It's something that's not clearly related to anything that was previously said. If you look in the cartoon here, you can see the chef adding chocolate syrup into the soup, and that's kind of what a non sequitur is like. It's adding in a statement that really has no connection to the first one, but sounds kind of convincing if you just listen quickly. So look at this, for example. Police are unable to arrest all the criminals today. Therefore, immigrants should not be allowed in the country. On the surface, someone might listen to that and go, yeah, we shouldn't allow immigrants in because the police can't arrest all the criminals today. But wait a second. How does it follow that police unable to arrest criminals mean that immigrants shouldn't be allowed in? The first sentence is talking about criminals. The second is talking about immigrants. The first is talking about the inability of the police to do their job, and the second is talking about a policy decision for a country in what nationality of people they would invite in. This is what we call a non sequitur. It's a type of logical fallacy, and you'll want to avoid it. This type of logical fallacy can come up a lot in places like social media, where someone will make a statement about something and then make a second statement that riles people up, but really isn't logically connected to it in any way. The next logical fallacy we'll look at is called a post hoc, or sometimes it's called a false cause. And in this, it assumes that since event B followed event A, then A must have caused B. Or in other words, If something happens after something else happens, that first thing must have caused it. Let's look at the example sentence for that. After they immigrated to France, their son got addicted to drugs. Immigration often leads to substance abuse. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is just because their son got addicted to drugs after they immigrated to France doesn't necessarily mean that immigration leads to substance abuse. Maybe if they'd stayed in their original country, he would have still got addicted to drugs. Maybe their neighbors immigrated to France and their son didn't get addicted to drugs. There's so many factors that come into it. The simple fact that he got addicted after they went to France doesn't mean that immigration leads to substance abuse. That's just a logical fallacy. Here's a fourth one. It's called slippery slope. And a slippery slope is a claim, usually without evidence, or in fact always without evidence, that the end result of something will be disastrous. Let me give you an example. If this refugee is allowed into the country, soon everyone will be trying to get in. If we give a little bit to this request or this person, soon everybody's going to be wanting to do it. Or in the famous expression, if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. And a slippery slope is the kind of thing often done by parents. For example, if my son tells me, "Oh, I just want to play a video game for half an hour," I might reply, "Oh, if you start that, soon you're going to be failing all your courses." That's called a slippery slope. The logical fallacy is saying that, well, if you do this one small action, then it's automatically going to lead to a very large and drastic action. Well, there's not necessarily any logic behind that. You don't know that if you take half an hour to play a computer game, that you're going to fail all your courses because you're some kind of computer game addict. Maybe you will, but most likely you won't. A slippery slope is a logical fallacy that's often used when we're afraid of dreadful results at the end, and we feel that this specific action is going to lead to that. Those are our first 4 logical fallacies. In a minute, we'll move on and look at the next 4.